Bugs, welcome to the episode. So thank you for coming to our ongoing series in which we take a bunch of shows that Cameron has read that I have not, and he's told me everything about, and then we do a deep dive about them because they've become the most popular media currently. So we did Dune Part 2, and now here we are in Three Body Problem, which I want to get quickly out of the way, our opinions, and I was surprised. The drama around this show is that this was created by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, D&D, the people that did Game of Thrones. And they executive produced it. I don't think they directed many of the episodes, if any at all. I was like, oh, I remember Game of Thrones. The rest of the internet does.
They subverted my expectations by making something good.
That was the crazy part, is everybody, I think, has collectively forgotten that they did the first several seasons of Game of Thrones. Just remember the last couple. I think that this was surprising because you've told me a lot about the Three Body Problem.
It is quite a ride.
I know a lot of the key moments. And by episode 2, a lot of the ones that you've told me about were done. And I was like, what? And so people have said online, this isn't really a spoiler, but there are 3 books in the Three Body Problem like series.
There's the first body, the second body, and then the threed body.
And the threed body. And this show actually takes a lot from the other books. It's not just the first book.
Yeah.
And you were live tweeting to me.
Oh yeah,
the whole time.
You said, Cameron, if we should do a video about this, and I was like, all right, but you will get the fire hose. Actually, I have to ask you probably the single greatest question: who's your least favorite character, and why is it Ogden?
That is true. This is very true.
Sam told me that and I fell over.
Well, it's just so funny because there are far fewer characters in the Three Body Problem book than in this show. And I think that is good because it branches out a lot of the topic so that you can explore it with each different character. And it's not like, hey, here's a couple of Mary Sue characters that are just so epic at everything. Here's some more intrigue, how they're connected, all that kind of stuff. But then that leaves a lot of room to make one of them insufferable and just like, wow, you guys are stupid. I think this is dumb. And I think everything you're doing is stupid. It's like, cool. You can leave.
The things in the book they did well, that were cool, they did well. The things in the book that sucked, they made worse.
Wait, really?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if I am super jazzed or not super jazzed to see where season 2 goes, because I know what's coming next. I will give you my theorized timeline of what they'll do if they're not intending to Stranger Things the shit out of this.
That's why I was so surprised, because I'm like, they used a lot of the buffalo on this one. I don't know how much is left, how much meat's left on the bone. And that was a couple of headlines that I saw is like Three Body Problem season 2 has backed themselves into a corner because they used a lot of really cool stuff.
No, they haven't. They have not backed themselves in a corner at all.
Really?
Season 2 is where you're either here for it or you are not.
That's also what I heard.
It is very similar to like Dune Part 1 versus Dune Part 2. If you're not here for Dune Part 1, you are not going to be here for Dune Part 2.
Well, yeah. And so the 3 books are The Three Body Problem, Dark Forest, and Death's End. And apparently Dark Forest is actually where the stuff happens that you would be interested enough to read the books about, which is different because the first book is like a Reddit thread of buzzwords from science. And so I was like, I kind of like that. I think this is cool. In high school, a friend of mine like showed me the book and they're like, oh, here's a bunch of stuff about it. I'm like, that sounds pretty cool. This is pretty awesome. And then it just goes and it has a lot of other stuff happening. So if you're the lol epic random person that knows what the Fermi paradox is, I feel like you'd like this show. I feel like it's
everyone like I don't understand that. There's like 1,000 idiots on YouTube who are like science channels. They're like, what's the Fermi paradox and why aren't we alone in the universe?
No, but if you're already interested in being subscribed to those channels, well, I mean, this book was written in 2009 or published, I think.
2008.
2008.
The first one.
So that was around the time when like all that Reddit epic bacon stuff was going on. It was like, did you know about this and this? Like, wow, science is so cool. Oh my God, I love the science. And like Big Bang Theory and stuff like that. Me as a teenager would have lost it. This would have been my favorite show. I think that they nailed all of those elements really well in a way that not only babies you a bit if you don't know some of those elements, which is cool enough. I like them putting all the cool science stuff in one place. I hate that I just said that. But then also they go further. They're like, well, here's where the logic goes for that.
It is when you said it was very Big Bang Theory, and then I started watching, I was like, that's very disrespectful to this show.
Well, I mean,
Big Bang Theory is the trashiest trash that masquerades around being nerd culture.
They at least didn't mention Marvel, DC, or Star Wars once.
Yeah, they bring up topical like brands and pieces that will unfortunately date the show.
Sure.
But at the same time are like not out of place weirdness. The show did most of the stuff great.
I was surprised when everybody's like, oh, well, Game of Thrones producers behind this, what's going to happen? And so
the
I
big
didn't
dragon
think,
did surprise me.
yeah. And so I was surprised how much of it I was like, oh, this is like some stuff happening. There's some like big stuff happening. The first scene is pretty intense and really good. Apparently is like exactly from the book, except for the hat you've told me. We'll get into that spoiler later.
It's not even really a spoiler. I'm
not.
just a little stickler. Like,
Sure.
this is when you have that one friend who's like, oh, they didn't make Hermione's hair frizzy enough, so I don't think it's like the books.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't read the Dermadillion, you see. Yeah. There were some pacing issues where some of it went a little bit slower than I'd like. They spent a lot of time on some interpersonal stuff where I'm just like, okay, can we...
Again, why is
reach
Augie your least favorite character?
Yeah, exactly. If you know nothing about the 3-body problem, I would love to get people's opinion from that, because I know basically all the spoilers that you've told me, and a lot of them. And so this series didn't come as a surprise. So when I was watching it, I was waiting for the stuff you've told me about. And I would have loved to get those small releases, because I could tell what they were setting up in certain places. When if I were just watching and being like, oh, that's weird that that's happening. Oh, that means this. Oh, that's cool. Getting those revelations would have been cooler to see. So if you haven't seen or read anything about the 3-body problem, I think it would be interesting enough to give the show a watch and see how you feel after the first episode. I think the first episode's a good like starting point.
I feel like I have to tell this for everyone who watches the show, because a reminder, the Game of Thrones dudes made this, which meant any level of gore and violence and horror you expect from a Game of Thrones, you should expect in the show.
Sure.
I cannot stress this enough, because the book did not do this. I'm going to make this one comment, like a warning for people who might not want to watch the show.
Sure.
I have never seen so much implied child death.
Yeah,
child killing.
Yeah, that's fair.
None of that. If that's something that's gonna, if you're like a real like does the dog die kind of person, you're not gonna want to check this out.
And that's actually a good tool. I think it's the website is called Does the Dog Die or Does the Horse Die or something like that. And it shows you for the piece of media if you should watch it if you are sensitive to that kind of stuff. That's a good point out. I'd say I highly recommend the show just because from everything you've told me about the book, I was like, they're not going to be able to adapt any of that. And then watching it, I was like, no, this is pretty good. Like, I not only enjoyed it from what you've told me about the books, but enjoyed it just as a watcher. That like my girlfriend was coming in and out, like doing other stuff while I was binging it, and she was just like, what is happening? I'm like, I could spoil it for you, but like, this is just bonkers. It's just cool on its own. I think there are going to be points from the show that you will see in those like TikTok and YouTube short things where they like take a part of a show that's like the most interesting part and like put it up, and they're like, look how cool, isn't this cool? You should go watch the show. So
also the cosmic dread, if I hadn't read the trilogy, I could really feel that I was supposed to be feeling a sort of existential dread throughout the entire show. I could feel it creeping up the back of my spine and then immediately being smacked down by my knowledge of the series.
Pretty good recommendation, I think, from both of us. And I think we're already going to start into well, was there anything else you wanted to say?
Spoiler.
Okay, spoiler. Bugs.
They landed it, and they did it in what I would argue is the truest place to have done it, because when they do it in the book,
that was the one scene that I'm like, I doubt they're going to cover this scene. And the fact that it's the last scene.
I was like texting you in real time, like, they fucking did it!
And so, long story short, last scene in the show is them talking about like the aliens called them bugs. They said, you are bugs. You're nothing to us.
Maybe we should explain the actual plot so they understand why they're aliens.
Aliens! Yeah, that is a big part of the show that if I saw the trailers, I wouldn't think. I feel like that was a jumping the shark moment. As soon as they bring up aliens and the character Jack is like, I don't know what the fuck you're going on about. If I didn't know the books, probably would have thought that was crazy. But I think they landed. I think it's really exciting and creepy, all this stuff they bring up.
Yes, the entire premise of the first book, which they adapted very well, is jumping back and forth between it's like 1960s, 70s.
1966 to 1977, and then they go to basically present day.
Communist China, this woman has experienced the worst parts of humanity because she had to watch her dad die during the Cultural Revolution. The hat thing is, during the revolution, apparently they did this thing where they bring you out on stage and basically make you renounce love of science, or like renounce anything that could imply God or like any sort of religious meaning. And so that's like a big thing they did a much better job in the show bringing up, is like the Big Bang Theory implies there's something before the Big Bang, which is room for God. And is there a God? We don't care.
Get out of here. Kill this guy. Oh my God. They did a really good job of that part. And I think you said the hat was supposed
So
to be.
it was like almost a caricature. I guess they did make them wear those big hats.
Yes.
That was a thing. But like in the book, for some reason, the guy describes the hat's like made of metal and it's like so heavy that it like is breaking his neck as he's trying to wear it. And, like a bunch of stuff. It's supposed to help explain why he dies so easily.
He was
Not
already
my hat,
beaten pretty bad. And yeah, it was really, really well done. The fact that they show not only the swell of the audience, but then everyone stopping and being like, oh, we killed that guy. Whoops.
I don't know, because like I don't remember in the book them stopping. I remember them still being frenzied, and she's just like, wow, I do not like anyone here. If a bunch of aliens came tomorrow and said, we will enslave you, I'd be like, cool.
I'd be like, dope.
But that will never happen
less.
to me.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate that comes back in the form of, well, everything that happens with Yi. Like, she's just like, no, this sucks. Specifically, when she reconnects with I mean, she was a girl, now she's like a young lady, I guess, but same actress. And her arm is cut off, and she's looking for any sort of like
Remorse.
Remorse. It's just like, will you not literally repent? She's like, why would I repent? No one repents. This is stupid. They cut off my arm. Where's my justice? It's like, what do you mean, where's your justice? You killed my dad. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and so to keep the pacing there fun, in the book, they're flipping, just like in the show, between modern time, which in the book I believe is like 2008, in the past, which we just discussed about. In the show, they made it 2024. Makes some of the like time stuff feel weird because there's not the same amount of like smartphones that they're dealing with. The author kind of like comes up with his own like cool VR idea that humans created. There's not this like weird like space Oculus that people wear.
Oh,
like the aliens don't give us that technology. The aliens help us create a game and is like funded by a bunch of these people, but it's never implied that the aliens themselves gave us the physical hardware to make that game possible.
It could be argued maybe they did both.
No, this is a problem. The fact that they do that is actually a problem for kind of like a big point of what the aliens are trying to do to humanity once they discover all this stuff. I think the important thing right now is just to remember the book, everything is happening either in communist China or in their modern day Beijing, China. In the show, they changed that. They made modern day England. Yes. And the task force is not like really a joint international task force. It's like a weird MI6.
Yeah.
And I think that really is weird because in the books, when you have, a Chinese woman in China did a thing, and now modern day Chinese people are actually helping fight this thing.
Yeah.
Makes it like, this is a human struggle. In this, it's like a caricature of like, Chinese people are bad, and the only people who can fix it are the white British people, two of which happen to be Asian.
Like spreading it out amongst like 5 or 6 characters, I feel is good because not only there's a diversity there, but also in the original, they're all Chinese. And it's interesting to me because all the stuff that happens in China, they were able to do like all the stuff with the Cultural Revolution, I think came off really well. They did make in China an adaptation of this. Do you know about that?
Yeah, I thought they made the Dark Forest.
No, it was the series.
The whole series?
But I think it might have just been the first book. But it's 30 episodes.
Damn.
And apparently it's bloated. And
it sounds bloated because I don't even think there's 30 episodes worth of stuff in like all 3 books.
I mean, I would be surprised to turn this into like a K-drama-esque thing where they're drawing out and everybody is like the inner machinations of their relationship. But apparently they really like put down a lot of that Cultural Revolution stuff. I wonder why. But this one, I think, does that pretty well. Like all the terrible stuff she goes through.
The reason I like the way they did it in the movie, or in the show, is because all 3 books have stuff happening technically now. Every single one of them starts now, while the woman is still alive.
Yeah.
And it's like a guy, the nanomaterials researcher is dealing with the weird thing with the Sophons putting numbers in his eyes. The second book, Luoji, who is the only character whose name I remember because he's such a freak. He's such a freak of a character. I cannot stress this enough. He is like born right now, and he talks to the scientist lady who sent the transmission. Yeah. Because she kind of gets fed up with aliens, and like they did the ant on the tombstone and everything. It was like that was a delicious callback to the beginning and end of Dark Forest. Really? Yeah, because they both start from the perspective of an ant walking over a tombstone, and the larger context is she's telling him this weird story about like hunters and farmers, or I don't remember the specific one. Thing? That joke, they like redid it to make it make more, or just to make it looser. Okay. And I'll explain what the joke means. It's like it's fairly clear on its face. Okay. And then the girl in the 3rd book and Wade and that like weird organization that creates the Staircase Project. Yeah. they are also like right now trying to create a, like, we're not going to waste time. If they're declaring war on us, then we're going to send our own spy to mess with them.
To which I heard that Wade doesn't even show up until the 3rd book.
He's only in the 3rd book. This is where the things that worked really well. Benedict Wong's detective character. He is in the book. He's in the 1st and 2nd book and a little bit in the 3rd book, I think.
Yeah.
And he is incredible.
Yeah.
Benedict Wong steals the show of every scene he's in, and he nails it. Same for the guy who plays Wade. Wade is exactly the disgusting, vile, the ends justify the means, but like this is humanity's survival kind of guy that he is in the book, and they nail that too. My problem is with the actual main characters of the story, because the problem is in the 3 books, the 1st book, the modern stuff is from the perspective of the nanomaterials researcher. I don't remember his name. All I remember is like all great sci-fi. The science is incredible and the characters are paper thin. He has like nothing to do other than experience the plot. He is like, oh no, someone's putting stuff in my eyeballs. That's weird. All right, well, I guess I'll go into this VR game. Huh, guess I'll go to this weird meetup. Huh, guess I'll help them arrest these random people that I didn't even know existed up until a month ago.
God. Yeah.
And then just like stuff is just happening to him.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like it has a lot of agency. Same for Luoji, is just like this weird freak of a character. He's so weird.
Yeah.
He's just so weird. If you've read The Dark Forest, you know what I'm talking about.
What did they do? What's a weird thing?
He invents a girlfriend in his mind.
Okay, that's enough. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good from there.
Yeah. And then the 3rd book, the main character is the girl whose crush does the staircase project.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so what they did for the show to make it a little more dynamic is they broke up the nanomaterials researcher into Augie, who is the worst, because the nanomaterials researcher, everything he does is subtle. He like goes in and is like, all right, I guess I'll mess with my research and that'll get them off my back. And it works.
Yeah.
And this is like, I'm shutting it down. That's not how businesses work.
Oh, yeah.
Because you'll get fired. They'll continue the research without you. And the clock, will the clock return to your eyes? Will it go to someone else? It doesn't make any sense to make it so overt in the show. Saul is kind of like hanging out with them. Kind of like reminds me of like one of the friends the guy had. But like really the only 2 characters who are consequential, who are supposed to be in the 1st book, are Augie's character and the detective.
Yeah, I heard that they added a lot, but that is all foreshadowing, or all like by the end of the show, each person has a thing to do, which I liked, but also that they're breaking it out so that you'll be hooked for the next season. Because all the stuff with the wall facer, I'm like, this is cool. I like this.
That was amazing. I was impressed they just went for it like that, because that's the second thing is the wall facer. So that's Saul. Saul is Luoji, which is just a freak who loves doing drugs and hanging out and doesn't think he amounts to anything.
Oh, dope.
And like,
cool.
I think they did a pretty good job of keeping it a little ambiguous, although it's not hard to know if you get there. It's like, why did they choose me as a wall facer? It's like, we don't know.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you mean you don't know? It's like, they want you dead. So we probably should, like, if you piss them off that bad, we should probably use you as a wall facer.
And I have to say, that's probably my favorite part of the entire show, is the fact that the aliens can't lie. Like, they just don't know how to do it. It doesn't compute. It's nothing they can do. And so I appreciate that makes it really fucking simple for anybody following the plot. He's like, oh, well, why are they doing this? Well, the alien said this. He's like, okay, they're not lying. They can't lie. So first of all, the alien should just shut the hell up and not tell them anything, because they're basically giving away the plot. But at the same time, it makes it very easy for the audience to be like, oh, they're trying to kill Saul. He must be important. Now we can move on that. Oh, they're straight up telling us what's happening. That's true. It's all true. We don't need to play any mind games with them.
In the books, they tweak that a little bit, because it's not like they can't lie. It's when they talk to each other, the way they talk is so directly in their brain that there is no way for them to lie. Them having the thought is them expressing it out loud. Like when they say, like, when we're scared, we're all scared, is because as soon as one of them says they're scared, no one else is acting brave or whatever. They've all felt it propagate
so
across
it's like
them.
instant
Yeah, it's like somehow like seen and felt immediately. Whereas for humans, like, there's a difference between what we think and what we say, and that's a big thing. Like that was something I thought they did really well, was with was Evans, the whole thing where he has the like fairy tales and stuff, and he's trying to explain lying. That was at the very beginning of the second book, where like he's already dead technically because he dies in the first book, exactly like that. But in the second book, he's like, oh, there's yeah, I feel like you don't understand this. And it's funny, like, it's like he's standing on the deck of the ship in the Panama Canal. So you, as a reader, know what's about to happen to him. But he's like trying to explain, like, yeah, it's wild because like I don't think you guys understand this, but like we can lie. We can. There's this concept for humans where we can just say something and have it not be true.
And I like how that all worked together in the plot, because I don't know how in the book, like the scientist, the nanofiber scientist, gets the numbers out of their eyes and keeps them out of their eyes. But I appreciate in this, it is, okay, he's communicating with the aliens, and then she has the numbers in her eyes, and then she turns off the thing, gets the numbers out of her eyes, but then the aliens basically cut all contact with the planet. So it's easy for her to like be like, okay, I can restart because they don't even care anymore right now.
Yeah.
Or at least the Sophons are doing something else.
It's
not as
like,
important.
if I recall in the books, it's pretty much revealed that like that's just a scare tactic. They don't do anything when the clock runs out. Nothing happens.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, I wanted to see what would happen in somebody's head when it happened, and that's why, like when you said Augie probably dies, I'm like, I mean, I would have
preferred that. I think I was just hopeful.
Yeah, like God, I gotta be honest, that first scene where like there's the numbers all written in blood, I'm like, bro, that's a lot of time you're spending to write down numbers that are gonna count down. This is being silly.
Yeah, because he has the seconds going.
Yeah, I'm like, dude,
I got really faster.
Yeah. But then I that's what I assume, considering they also show Wade at the end with like no eyes, as a like vision they put in his head. Is I assume in the show they're implying that's what happens.
Holy shit! You tell me when you're ready to talk about the Sophons, because I hated that.
Really?
I despise the Sophons.
Okay.
We'll get there. We can get there now, or we can get there later. But for right now, I was just trying to go through like how they broke up the characters.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because the other thing was, so Jack and
Will?
Jin.
Oh, Jin, yeah.
So Jin is the main girl from the third book. She's the main protagonist from the third book. Although she is also a very passive protagonist in that one. She's like constantly like not wanting to do stuff. But just because she's associated with Will, and Will kind of forces the situation on her, like just like in the book, the guy gets this windfall. Like it's so weird in the book. In the book, what happens is the guy is also kind of like a loser, and his sister also comes to him and totally sucks. And he has a friend from school who comes to him and is like, hey, you gave me this idea for like this weird grass soda, and now I am a multi-billionaire conglomerate of like snack foods. So I feel bad. Here's some money. And he's like, I don't want your money. It's good. It's like, I still feel weird. Here's some money. And so he takes the money and they create the like Stars Our Destination project. And he's like one of the few people, like no one falls for this gimmick. No one who's rich is like, I'm not going to buy a star. So he goes there. They basically talks them into giving him like a really like a visible but extremely cheap planet that winds up being extremely important in the story later.
That's what's funny is in the show they have the Stars Our Destination program where you can buy a star or buy a planet or whatever. And the thing I find funny about that is that right now the UN signed I think it's called the Outer Space Treaty, where you cannot own space.
Yeah.
But you can own, if you land somewhere, there's like a zone of interest around you that you control while you're mining or something. And they haven't been able to like really go into detail about that because it really hasn't happened where someone's impeded on someone's space in space. But overall, like I thought it was really funny doing that when I'm like, I thought you couldn't own space right now, especially on a piece of paper.
Don't tell Elon Musk that.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's so that's Jack's character is kind of interesting because he fills in for tertiary characters, then he just dies, and that was the worst part because he's probably the one actor having the most fun outside of Wade and Benedict Wong.
Nothing was more fun for me when she's just like, okay, I'm here with my other theorist. He's like, what's the name? He's like, Francis Bacon. I'm like, yeah, this is great. I appreciate it. He was fun.
So the nanomaterials researcher is also the guy playing the game in the first book. So having Jin and Jack hanging out and doing that makes it feel less interconnected.
Yeah, like everybody has like a quadrant of the plot that they get to. We can cut between them and it makes sense instead of like one protagonist.
And that's the other problem though, is like Saul sucks because he just spends the whole time like being like, I want to do drugs and you shouldn't feel bad and want to die. And also you have terminal cancer and I have no concept of how that affects people, but I'm going to continuously tell you that you should live because we do not respect your wishes. And that was just extremely exhausting.
That's the part that I thought paced too long. Is that you lose like an episode and a half just with what's happening with Will, which I think was fine. I think it's a good thing to add, but my God, it's like a big part of it when episodes 1 through like 5 are like speed running all the cool stuff.
Yeah.
And then you get hit with like episode 6 and 7. You're like, Okay, when do we get to anything
I mean, like
that's interesting?
Saul's entire episode is just that one conversation in 7 and then episode 8.
Yes.
Like it's just the wall facer stuff.
Yeah.
If he had shown up like halfway through the show, he would have had just as much impact.
Well, and he doesn't do anything that like contributes to society after minute 10 of the first episode because they're shutting down Verrier's program because
Yeah, they made up a particle collider in Oxford.
But especially the thing that I found so interesting is that there's a lot in episode 1 that sets up the rest of the show that is only said. And if you're not paying attention to what they're saying, you're going to forget it. And then they'll bring it up later and be like, oh, that's interesting. I wish they set that up. Oh, no, they totally did, which is the stuff about the collider not working. All of the colliders aren't working. We don't know why. As well as Saul being like, okay, well, no, I'm going to be here till the very end. Then after it ends, he's just a dickhead, like floating around
he's just doing drugs, hanging
Yeah.
out. I feel you, man.
Yeah.
I too would like to just hang out and do drugs. That sounds like a great life. But unfortunately, you are the protagonist of a very expensive TV show. Please do something.
As well as Wade is introduced like off screen, like Clarence brings him up, but then that he actually gets introduced and it's way better.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But he's going to be Luoji, and I'll get there when we get there about what I think they're going to do for season 2. But like he has the opportunity to be a really cool character, and they have the opportunity to fix a lot of the weird stuff that came with that character. But again, you've taken some paper thin characters and stretched them out into slightly more characters.
As well as the stuff with Raj. I don't know if Raj has
is
anything to do with anything
in the books.
Okay.
He's just not Raj, because again, he's a Chinese military officer. He joins their space force and he wants to do the space stuff, but he is not dating Jin.
Yeah.
Again, Jin is a different person, and also he is a Chinese military officer, and he does not help with the like weird wire thing. Like that's what I hate is like I get in a show, you have to pay for actors, and so recycling an actor, reusing plot, like tying together plot lines saves you money in the long run, but it also makes the world extremely small.
Yeah.
Because the entire premise is like humanity is struggling in all these different little places, and because every book has a different protagonist, even though each one is Chinese, you feel like they are part of a larger network of people. So it's not just like these 7 assholes are the only reason humanity survived.
I mean, I feel like the way they're going to stretch that, and correct me if I'm wrong if this is in the book, is that they have the cryogenic freezing thing.
Yeah, so that was already a technology in their world in the books. This one they had to like invent it, and they like do the sickness or whatever. That's fine. That's they pretty much, that's it. Is like, they make a big battery looking box and you go into it and you can stay in there for however long.
Yeah, but the way I assume they're going to stretch out these characters is that Wade says, he's like, I'm just going to freeze myself like and only come out a day a week and then stretch my entire life by 7 for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that is what his character does in the final book.
Okay,
he is
well, there you go.
Literally him and Jin, they do the staircase project, and then she like they fail just like that. And she goes into hibernation, and then Wade goes into hibernation. They come out, the Trisolarians are like almost here. Shit's getting wild. Humanity's kind of falling apart. Wade is coming in and out of the story the entire time. Until the very end of the book.
Which I think is interesting. Like,
it is cool. Like, he is a cool character. They think like the Trisolarians. If one of us survives, we all survive. I'm not going to sit around and trying to think of like some magic solution. As long as like, no matter how stupid and terrible and wasteful the project is, if it gets us even an inch closer to our goal, it is worth it.
And that's the annoyance with Augie, is how much I mean, I get it. It's existentially horrifying, a lot of the shit that they have to do. No, but she's just frustrating to watch.
Everything about Augie is stupid because in the books, her character is a point of view character who just things are happening to her or to him. In the show, Augie is a successful researcher, for some reason has a hilarious amount of agency in this project, even though she's already delivered the product. She already did the solution. So at this point, it literally doesn't matter if she stops her research or not. They already have everything they need to make the plot happen. And on top of that, she is constantly upset that things are happening to people. And it's like, I get it. First of all, there are not supposed to be children. It's never explicitly said that the Judgment Day has children on it. It's clearly their like mobile base.
That's crazy.
But there's no like, oh, look at all these happy families. The part where those like the little banners like falling down as it's coming to that lady, that was delicious. They nailed that, because you do not see inside the ship in the book. In the book, you are watching basically Augie's character watching like a scan of like the boat going through, and like the part I didn't think they were going to be able to like make it look so good. The part where the guy's using the hose, he's like, what happened to my hose?
That's like
that's in the book. And that's like the
awesome.
only sign you get that's actually working.
Oh wow.
Until you start noticing other chunks of the like boat's surface falling down, and then the whole thing listing to the side and then falling apart. That was exceptionally well done. And having the horror of being inside the boat was delicious, because it's supposed to be like, yes, there is a cost to fighting like this.
Yeah.
But it is a necessary cost.
And that's one of the like, you know, Reddit, oh, this would be such a cool thought experiment thing, that when you see it, you're just like, this is cool. Like it's horrifying. Like, oh my God. I want to just rewatch. And that's what I mean. Like, that's something that I could see resurface on TikTok and people just be like, what is this from? What is this? Like, it's just so cool. And that's what Jess like
it's not even an original
on.
idea. That's the funniest thing.
Oh yeah.
It's like, I was reading Ringworld like not 3 months ago, and they do the same thing. A character accidentally decapitates himself because he runs through this like wire that's super thin, and the only way you can touch it is by holding one of the anchor ends.
Sure. And that's what I mean, is that like, it's just a cool idea, and seeing it put on screen like that, you're like, oh my God, that's awesome.
And it's just an example. It's supposed to be an example of like, well, how's my nanowire research that can cut goddamn diamonds supposed to be useful for hurting people?
Yeah.
Like everything she does is so stupid, because like she's like, as she's doing it, is like, why would this gun hurt someone?
Exactly. And I like that kind of the way that she wraps up, is that at the very end, she's using that as a filter, and so it's more of a humanitarian effort.
I mean, that's
fine.
I feel there's two ideas that are constant throughout the book. One, if one of us survives, we all survive. That's something the Trisolarians are saying. That's something the humans are trying to like live as well, even though we kind of exist in a different mental mode. The other thing is, for every weird, horrible thing we do, we are creating something new that has potential to be good. And so like the filters was a good example of that. Like in the future, like, oh, we have like these cool hover like jetpack things and stuff that are all a product of us coming together as a society and building these things for the war effort that in turn make life better. To say that like, yes, this was created with the intention of killing an entire alien civilization, but it has positive benefits for us as people too. That I think they nailed in the story. Although they do like a good job of explaining like there's a line between like real progress and like this fake commercial progress that we as a society seem to fall for, that they get into a lot in the second book. I'll be curious if they do that a lot.
Okay. I'm interested. See, that's the thing, is that this caught my attention.
And I want to be clear, Augie could be literally anyone on the planet. They're just a poorly written character, because all they do is they complain about the razor wire. They yell at their friends about like, why are you playing this game? You shouldn't play this game. You're not adults with your own agency. All right, well, we'll just do it. We don't care. She doesn't do anything. And also the whole plot line about her being with Saul, I think, is terrifying, because in the second book, Luoji has this like previous girlfriend that ends up with all the weird creepy shit comes from an idea she basically puts in his head. And Augie is the only previous girlfriend Saul has that is like a proper previous girlfriend, until like Saul is a womanizer and the beginning of the Wallfacer announcement happens. And so it's like, oh, Augie's not only going to suck in this season, she's going to suck in the next season.
Yeah, we've mentioned the Trisolarans, and so in the show, this entity is called the Scifi, which in the original book, written in Chinese, that's what it's actually called. But in the American translation, it's the Trisolarans. That was a big thing that people are like, why did they change the name? It's because it's the actual original name.
It's actually in the message. The aliens send them like, hello, we are the Scifi, and she sends back the Scifi ? And they say the Scifi's nuts and humanity is invaded. And we lose.
That's how we lose. Yeah, you see.
And everything else after that's for 100 years of them finishing the joke.
Yeah. And man, I would have really loved to have known nothing about the show and gotten to the point where she's sending the message, because that was really, I think they did that really well.
I mean, they pay it off like that episode.
Yeah, that's what I mean, is that this show just barrels through so much stuff. And when you told me about it first, I'm like, that's interesting. Like, that's such a cool moment.
Well, yeah, it's a book. You have a million years to like let a scene breathe, as long as a publisher is willing to publish it.
Yeah, and I think they do it well.
Yeah,
in the show. Yeah,
that's the thing though, is like there are beats in the book that, because they were turned into, it's happening in Britain, it's happening with these people instead of these people, it's happening, it completely changes the energy and vibe of the show. And actually, I think this would be a nice place to talk about the game.
Yeah.
And if you want to, also the Sophons.
Yes, that's exactly where I was going.
Originally in the book, the Scifi never give us advanced in technology, because as they pointed out in the show, humanity advances at this exponential rate that they do not. They are surprisingly linear because their planet is constantly getting destroyed and rebuilt. So they don't have the ability to create this like exponential progress. So they are trying to stop our science to make sure we do not advance. This becomes like a big part of the Dark Force problem. It's like, if you find out about someone and then go to invade them in 1,000 years, even though 1,000 years ago you were more advanced than them, in 1,000 years they can be multitudes more advanced than you and completely wipe you out. So the entire point of the Sophons is they send them to Earth, A, as a communication device, B, as a scare tactic, but C, and most importantly, to completely inhibit their understanding of physics. Because in the third book, they basically make it very clear, physics is the weapon. It's no longer about like, we'll make this cooler nuke, we'll make this bigger ship. It's like literally the way that like different civilizations are killing each other in the cosmos is with math and physics at a fundamental particle level.
The moment that I love is the strategic like conversation between Wade and Jin, where they're like, okay, well now we know they only have 2 Sophons on Earth. So if we turn on every particle accelerator, we can distract one of them, and that leaves the other one. And he's like, well, what if we put a particle accelerator on the moon? It would be harder for that Sophon might just live up there on the moon. So I appreciate that. The tactics behind, okay, well, we're now doing like warfare, like information gathering of like, how do we stop this?
As someone who's had to do those kinds of thought experiments for like weird projects, that was a surprisingly refreshing scene where like I could not stand in the book and in the show when they're like, well, you can't do that because there's not enough nukes or whatever. And like Wade's like, here's a blank check, shut the hell up and tell me your best ideas. And it's like really exhausting when you have to work on something, especially when the goal is to save humanity. And some wise ass with a PhD tells you like, well, we can't do that because this, and this is like, I understand you understand like the theory, but from a practical standpoint, that was not the question that was asked. Please back up. And so they really nailed that about Jin. They really nailed that about like Wade's like weird, like always advanced energy. I was very happy to see they gave Benedict Wong's character Clarence. They actually made him the one who comes up with the like nanowire idea. Because that's what he does in the book. Like in the book, it's an entire scene where like all these like smart ass generals from all these different countries like, well, how are we supposed to get the ETO? Well, we could do this, or we could do this, or we could do this, or we could go with some guys or bomb it or whatever. And he was like, sometimes you need a stupid idea to solve a smart problem. And he's like, what do we do? Well, we take this magic knife wires that this guy invented and we cut the ship a bunch.
So awesome. And man, that scene's so good.
This is the problem. They create the simulation. The Sophons tell them how to create the simulation to explain, like that is a recruiting tool. In their world, in the book, like not everyone on Earth has an Oculus Rift. You kind of have to like afford one. But you can enter this world, experience it, go through all this like weird stuff. But it's implied all that is human technology, not created by the aliens, as far as I could understand. And that's important because that and that weird, super thick hard drive,
which conveniently looks like a red book, which I thought was interesting.
Communism.
Exactly. See, it's all communism at the end of the day.
Man, they really do just not like communist China. I know it's a product of like where it was published and everything, and so like there are going to be things lost in translation, but like I couldn't unsee it. Anyway,
but you said like the thing petabyte of
that thing
data
is a plot convenience. They don't want to go through the part where they had to put like glue together like dozens of servers to basically retrieve the data. Like, oh, we already have the big chunk of data right here. But that means the Sophons taught them about nanotechnology. And that is antithetical to the point of the Sophons. The Sophons aren't supposed to be teaching them about cool new physics ideas. And yet they taught them how to make a rig that allows you to like put a human brain in a virtual simulation. Also, in the second book, these like advanced alien probes make it to Earth. And they're like these silver teardrop looking things. They're perfectly mirrored, and they look mirrored and domed in the same way that the like goggles looked mirrored and domed.
And I love that effect whenever they can achieve that in a show where it's like a camera is technically looking at it, but you see the reflection of someone else. I love that kind of effect. The only reason I could justify that, like the reason why they give them that technology, is because they thought that they were allies. Like the people were allies, so they're like, okay, well, we'll build this recruitment tool and then we'll help you build like crazy technology because you're on our side. We can only speak the truth. Oh wait, y'all are lying to us? No more, get out of here. You've explained to me the simulation before, and I, while watching it, was like, this is just cool. I think it looks really cool in the way that they're doing it.
I think they nailed it. I think they nailed it. That girl is not in the simulation.
This is my follower. You may call her Follower.
There's a character called Follower. He's just like another dude who's following the like guy going to the temple.
Okay.
The entire point of the simulation is to get the person to learn about the world. Oh, you figured it out, it is a 3-body world, which means you understand science enough to understand this. I have opinions about like the scientific inquiry, like hand waviness that they do in the end of the first book and how they also do it in the show. But yeah, like the point is just to say this planet is boned. If you understand that and you are like sympathetic to their plight, you would probably be pro ETO.
Yeah, and I think they hammer that home really well. And there was a little bit of a foreshadowing that I liked, is that when they first tell her is like, make the time move fast. Put your hand on the ground. That's how it works. I'm like, that's cute.
Put your hand on the ground. It speeds up time.
But when she does that and you see the sky, you can see the suns moving in a weird pattern.
Yeah.
And that alone, I was like, oh my God, that's great. So if you're paying attention, you already know the reveal for the second level kind of thing.
Yeah.
This has made me think so much about the actual N-body problem, because the more in my life I see more than like 3 things show up, like more than like 2 things that are working together, it's just so funny that I'm like, wow, there is like a physics problem or a theoretical problem that just shows how the more you add people to this thing, or the more you add entities to a system, the more infinitely complicated it gets. So if you want to keep something simple, keep it at just 2. The book does probably a better job of explaining it, because I feel like the show kind of yada yadas over how interesting to me the 3-body problem actually is.
The
with
game
3
or
suns.
the story?
The actual idea of the 3 bodies.
They pretty much give it about the same amount of attention.
Okay.
They give a lot more attention to the game, where they're like, oh, this is my friend Von Neumann, and I'm Isaac Newton, and a bunch of other thinkers who are like come up with ideas, and watch, we made this computer out of people and all this stuff. Like, it just feels like you're coming off as, look, I know about computers, I know about Von Neumann architecture.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just like they really toned that down, and they kind of made the little like sage characters like a lot more shit-eating grin and a lot less look at me, look how smart I am. Again, the girl is not in there. A girl does not constantly die to make one of the main characters feel bad. It's more like the character is just very curious about this game because it feels like such an intellectual puzzle, and now they can't use their brain power on creating like the nanowire. There's like, this thing I've dedicated my life to, I can't work on anymore, so I'm going to use my brain power for this thing over here. The first one is saying the only way to understand our system is to understand science. You can't use mysticism. You can't just like come up with silly nonsense.
Sure.
The second one, as you pointed out, is it is not just a like weird system. It is this 3-body system, which is extremely hard to understand, especially when you're inside of it. And then the third one is saying you literally cannot model this system if you do not know the starting positions and the starting information of the pieces, which in a weird way, I always hated that, because technically in the book, if you're advanced enough to create a sophon, when they're creating the sophons, they're talking about how cool it is that like they unfold a proton and they like mess up twice. They accidentally make it into these like big 3-dimensional objects that are accidentally like shooting too much light at different parts of their planet, or a 1-dimensional string that wraps around the entire planet, but it's like infinitely thin, so it doesn't do anything. It just like glitters and then disappears. And then when they make the 2-dimensional one, they unfold it so they can like etch the computer programming into it using like strong and weak force. Like, it's implied to show they have a mastery of science. But when they do that, they make the entire planet really cold because they block all the light from the stars. And it's like, if that's true, you don't have a problem, because you'll never have to worry about it getting too hot again.
Yeah, damn.
What are you talking about? You guys made 4 of these damn things?
I really like that. I really like the idea of the sophons. But yeah, there was an element of them in this that I'm like, okay, it's just magic. And I get that. It's higher level science, but it's
it is
magic.
unforgivable levels of magic.
Yeah.
I will tell you some of the things they do that are unforgivable. One, they make people invisible.
Yes,
How?
exactly, yeah.
Why? What? If they scrubbed the data in real time from the camera,
That's what I
I would have
thought.
forgiven that.
Yeah.
But the fact that you watch Clarence basically not see Jack get murdered in front of him is unforgivable.
I would have found it way better if Clarence was looking through his camera and couldn't see him, and then like looks and then sees it. Like, that would have been better.
Yeah,
But
then he
the
like
fact-
runs in and she's already gone. It was like, oh my God.
Man, yeah, that was a little bit too, no, maybe not too much. It's the kind of thing that like I watching was just like, oh, that's cool that they can do that, when like it's pretty out there, like very, very magic. As well as you can ascribe like the, you know, numbers on people's eyes to the sophons, like coming in and basically drawing it
Now
on your eyeballs.
that is something they can do in the book, because what it does is it just like squiggles on their retinas and basically
God,
causes
that's
the
crazy.
retinas to fire in a pattern that makes it feel like oh, I'm seeing this clock everywhere. Although the Sophons are a lot more subtle and fun about it, and that like at first they're like only in photographs you'll see the timer, and then eventually it's stuck into his vision until he's finally done. And he's talked about like, yeah, it's actually trivial for them to be able to do all the other things they do and squiggle numbers into my eyes at the same time.
That's pretty cool. I mean, if you had longer amount of time to set it up, I think that would have been more interesting.
The Sophons make him hallucinate at the end, where the eyeballs are out of his head and all this crap, and they're like making the like plane flicker and junk. Is like, you're doing too many things. The Sophons, if they can do this, there's no contest. They can just sabotage all our technology in real time and constantly kill everyone.
Yeah, that's why I appreciate that conversation with Jin and Wade, where they're just like, oh well, we can distract the Sophons, but the fact that they can just show up and make you see anything and more or less like hallucinate is like, okay, well, what's the...
And also invisible.
Yes.
I cannot get over the fact that they made it, because in the book, what happens is it's a lot more subtle. He's like, he goes, the main character guy who's supposed to be Augie goes to like a museum, and he gets these like cool glasses that like if you stare up at the night sky you can see cosmic background radiation. It's a BS thing for a BS thing. And while he's looking up, he sees the background radiation flicker on and off. And that's what, like, the whole world doesn't see it happen. I did not mind that they made it happen across the entire world to be like, hey, we need to get this story going.
Sure.
So I was okay with that change, but then the like Sophons just kept doing weirder and more shit. And also when I saw the samurai girl decapitate Jack's character in the first time, I was like, they put my favorite character in this show. Yeah, she's a character. The Sophons in the third book, they create basically a like cyborg body that is piloted by a Sophon so that they can interact with humans using human like figure and culture. And she is exactly a Japanese looking samurai wielding woman who is insane. She like decapitates people in one scene, and she's like constantly calling humans bugs and making fun of humans and saying how we're all worthless. And she's just this weird robot piloted by a Sophon that's piloted by an alien civilization running around causing havoc on Earth, and it is hilarious.
Okay, that's rad.
Why did you do that?
Well, I mean, who knows if they'll actually tackle that in the next season.
I mean, they made Wade see her in real life, which was also stupid. That's not a thing.
I don't know how much I love the eye in the sky moment. Is that like straight up from the book?
No,
yeah, that's a lot.
There's the you are bugs thing, and that is paid off with their trip into the Everglades. The Sophons are never so overt. In fact, if a Sophon is unfolded, you can actually destroy it. If you nuke a Sophon while it's unfolded, the nuclear explosion will disrupt the membrane of the Sophon and cause it to basically lose its entanglement or something. This is another example, like the author like really thought about the science and then did not think about the characters.
That's fair. Which I like that. I like that in certain books.
Yeah, I like Dune.
Yeah, exactly. The bugs thing and everyone on the planet freaking out was fair enough, but I guess I appreciate that it kind of shows that, okay, now humanity is rallying together instead of having that like unit start at the beginning of the show. Like you were mentioning in the book that there is a like UN style group that is like, okay, we're fighting against the aliens. When now it's like, okay, well now here's a rallying cry.
The core thesis of the book comes from a very Eastern philosophy that does not value the individual, but values the group, and says basically, if one of us survives, we all survive. If humanity can survive in any form, we win.
And I'd say that I don't know how the other books go, but I feel like the Foundation show and this show have a similar problem.
Do not bring up the Foundation show.
No, well, just the issue.
That's disrespectful.
Just the issue being that they're about like a pretty high, concept sci-fi thing.
And paper-thin characters.
Yes, and that this shows that, okay, yeah, like you mentioned, you sign up actors to be a part of this thing, and you want the people that are watching want to see them, and then over the course of these seasons where the actual book, the content actually goes to be like, okay, cool, it's 10,000 years in the future or something, but then the same characters are there or actors, you're like, okay, this is kind of silly. But I get with the cryo sleep thing, that makes a lot of sense. But in the form of like, okay, well, this is about, if one of us survive, all of us survive. The fact that they're like kind of holding on to these characters seems like a lot. But like you mentioned, I assume they show up later.
So do you want to get into like my predictions for how this is going to go for season 2?
Well, the very last thing that I wanted to mention is that the Santi, they dehydrate. I thought that was done really well and disturbingly.
Oh, God, yes.
I appreciate that all of the stuff that you've told me about the show, like the content from the book, I was like, oh, cool, here it is.
With the exception of the main characters, they did everything well.
And I'm interested how they're going to address the Santi, because yeah, they deliberately say, like, we don't look like this. We did this for your benefit.
I will say one thing I was kind of bummed they took out was Ye's character.
Yeah.
She falls in love with a political officer on the base.
Mm-hmm.
They have a kid together. And there's this moment. She doesn't know she's pregnant yet.
Oh.
But basically there's that her like husband political officer and this other political officer who's like higher than them. He figured out that she sent a signal, and she's worried that if he tells anyone else, then he'll like basically destroy her plans or give the Santi not enough ability or whatever to overcome us, because she's just so naive to think that aliens that can come to our planet wouldn't be able to deal with 1960s technology.
Sure.
She basically creates this like fake situation where they have to go down to check like an antenna array, like that's down the side of the mountain. Basically that part she was going to jump off of in the show.
Oh yeah.
And what happens is her husband is like, oh, I need to go down there with him. And she really doesn't want him to go because she's taking the saw and broken it up so that she can cut the rope while he's down there. And the political officer will fall to his death. And so now her husband's down there with him. And there's like this really tense moment in the book.
Okay.
Where she has to basically decides to kill her husband, the first man she's ever tolerated enough to love, in order for her bigger ideal to live. And so the fact that they don't show that, but they still show her wanting to throw herself from Radar Peak, and also like saying like how macabre it is, kind of like doesn't feel like it's paid off at all. It's just like she's just suddenly there, and then Tatiana's there. It's like, we just gotta finish this up.
Well, like you mentioned, there's a lot in this that it seemed to be playing like lip service to the books, but in a way that like, oh, here's a wink if you did read the book, like the boats and like the ant, and that cliff. I feel like there's more probably.
Actually, the fairy tale book is also a reference, although they don't mention it at all in the third book. They do not have Will and Jin's characters, the ones that are based on the book, don't really have that kind of like romantic previous relationship.
Book spoilers.
Like she only finds out that this guy even had feelings for her. Like they didn't have this like on and again, off again, like I love you, but we're friends. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
So it's not felt the same way. But in the third book, the way Will is supposed to help them when they find his body and do all the jazz that they think they're going to do is he invents a fairy tale. He does this thing. It's a play on the Dark Forest joke that Ye tells to Saul in order to basically teach them how to do faster than light travel and solve the problem.
Oh shit.
Yeah, and so that's actually going to be paid off. That is a like mild, like you don't know what this means right now, but you will probably next season.
Okay, shit.
There's a lot of that stuff. What I didn't enjoy was all the like, yeah, this was something that was in the book that we didn't bother bringing up. Fuck you.
I think we should get into a couple of like interesting things that you think were set up that could come up later. Let's not spoil too much.
I'm going to spoil everything now.
No.
So this book or this season perfectly captures most of what happens now in the stories. I imagine the next season, if they don't stretch it out for infinity, you're going to get 3 periods. You're going to get the continuation of the Wallfacer project in the present, and then the Wallfacer project in the future, as we get to the part where the aliens suddenly show up and things are happening. We also get Jin going into stasis, waking up in the distant future after stuff happens, and then far future, and then farther future, and all these like basically I expect the next season to be, we start now, then we're going to like, I guess we're gonna have different episodes where we time jump and time jump, because like they're pretty exhaustive about how relativistic time is important to them, and that we're gonna fly forward in time and do a thing.
Well, I love that. I love that in storytelling where time is played with in that way of just like, okay, well, yeah, it's relative, but especially that we can have people come in and out of time and give different context and like other things have happened. So I'm excited to see how they do that, because once they mentioned that with Wade, I'm like, yeah, okay, great, let's do it. I can't wait to see that. Yeah,
and they're gonna do that. The Jin and Saul's characters are the only 2 I know that will continue on, and then Will basically show up for like all of a scene, and we might get an episode where he's like hanging out with the, I hope they never show us the Tri-Solarians. We never see them in the books.
Like at all?
Never, ever see a Tri-Solarian in the book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We only interact with them through a Skype call with Will, the Sophon robot, and like the Sophons themselves. There is scenes in the book where they describe a Tri-Solarian, but it's never like humans having to react to them. It's like the Tri-Solarian, there's like a chapter where the Tri-Solarian gets her message, is like, oh, you do not want to reply to this. And he's like sending it back, and it mirrors her sending the original message. It's like, It's like this literary symmetry that's nice, but like we didn't need it. They did a fine job of it
Sure.
in the show. It's fine.
Yeah, I think you live tweeted to me. It's like, oh, the goldfish. It's like his head in a jar. You see. Like,
It's
yeah.
also representation of humanity because the Sophons can see us no matter where we go on Earth. The goldfish is
Oh.
always exposed.
This is the thing about this show that I find so interesting is that they seem to have a reverence for the source material in that way. That there is enough of that if you read the books, you're getting these elements. But if you didn't, you can still like read into it to be like, oh, that's interesting. And then people like you can be like, no, that's from the book. It's cool. Isn't it cool?
Especially now that I know that the showrunners were the Game of Thrones showrunners,
Yeah.
it is very obvious to me the way in which, just like Game of Thrones, they love the world. They love the science, much like they loved the fantasy, but they're kind of botching the characters and they're kind of botching why certain things happened in certain places. Why Britain? Why this random cast of
Okay,
people?
fair enough,
Why are they stretching out these ideas so much? I'm not saying that I didn't like the characters or the ideas. I'm just saying the context, like you have to change other contextual pieces to not just make it a very awkwardly one-sided, these people are wrong and bad, so these people are right and good.
Sure. And that's something that I don't know if they address in the books, but I really want to be a major focus is the fact that this is a human problem, not a specific country problem. And so everybody's pulling their resources together and taking care of it, which is, it's the kind of media that I really like seeing now when like everybody's just working together. We're not all self-obsessed people. It's like we have a bigger goal that we want to get through. And what is that going to cost? And let's do it. And I hope that that persists. You know, we don't get a bunch of like squabbling in between.
Yeah, I was blown away by the wall facer payoff. I was
Yeah.
like, oh my god, like the first book is really just not that interesting except for the part with the boat and the part with the bugs at the end.
Sure.
Where he's like taking them to a field outside of Beijing, taking them to the swamps of Florida was whoa, Chefsky. That was probably the greatest like touches. Like, where is the one place where truly the most awful things will never die?
Yeah,
The
we got to
Everglades.
think like Florida man, you
Yeah.
see.
They would never expect us to throw an alligator to Starship.
Shit, it just might work. See, it's Clarence style idea, you know, like setting up a
Exactly.
ship.
I think they did a good job. I think they adapted it for a larger audience, and I think there are still plenty of things that will bother you if you were just not on board with that thing.
If you haven't seen the show, why are you watching up to now? We even spoiled some of the books. But I am very curious in the comments. If you didn't know anything about the 3-body problem, I would love to hear like initial reactions because it is, if I didn't know anything about it, I think I would have been like, this is probably my new favorite show. I think they, both that and Dune Part 2, I think do a really good job of like taking stuff from the source material that is very interesting and like is the core issue, but then adapting stuff that's like, okay, here's more characters, so you'll pay more attention, you'll be more interested, as well as we can like have each of them represent other stuff that happens in the books, as well as here are stuff that we just don't have time for, but you can see. Here's some quick hints about them.
Also, just real fast so that no one like blasts you in the comments. The thing about Evans being what's her name's dad
Yes.
is also stupid. Like I mentioned, so she falls in love with a guy. She doesn't know that she's pregnant. She has her husband fall to his death. That is also like kind of like fueling this like, oh, what the hell is really going on? I've never had to think about my future. Now I'm having to think about my future. Now I'm reassessing how much of this I'm okay with.
That's a lot
And-
for that character. They really don't.
Yeah,
touch on.
they just tossed that crap right out the window and pretty much are like, just because you abandoned me, so I don't have to like you. But like they basically kind of give Evans, like Evans is there. They meet him in like the 70s, the financial backing for their entire project, all sorts of stuff. Again, they changed this one thing, and as a result, it kind of like messes with how she grows to understand maybe she was wrong to want to kill humanity. Because here it's like very like just happen. But like there, she's like, she has to have a kid. Then she has to live in this small town. Then as she gets older and she's still stuck at Red Coast Base, she's like teaching kids about science who are at the town and also helping them go off to like school in the major areas and like become something. And she's realizing like, oh, I was an angry little kid and maybe what I did was bad.
I feel like that would have been better if they had more time that we could see.
I
But
refuse to believe that this 8-episode miniseries did not have more time.
well, they spent a lot of time on Will and him chilling in a cabin for a while, which
Also, stop saying like, I don't want you to do this. Why not? He
Yeah.
already doesn't want to be alive anymore. He already was dealing with so much. If he was like, he felt so, like, I understood why he was like, this gives me purpose.
Yeah.
And then also I love the part Wade was like, he's our guy because he's not our guy. I was like, that is exactly Wade's weird, like, I am not. There is no box. There is no even like physical 3-dimensional universe I operate in.
Yeah, the Lisan Al Gaib element you texted me. It's just like he's too humble to be the guy, to be the staircase or the wall facer or anything. Stuff with Ye, I really appreciate kind of how simple it is and how horrific it is to have the Judgment Day people and like everybody that's part of the summit, where it's just like, no, I don't care. Like that single-mindedness, I appreciated to see in the show because, of course, yeah, you don't have all of that time to pursue like, well, here's how they were a kid and now they've grown up and they realize that they were an idiot. Showing that there is a sect that would just be like, no, we don't know what the hell we're doing. We need somebody else to come in and take over. Works for me. Like for that person to think that, I think was achieved pretty well in the show. But yeah, I agree that as a human being learning a life lesson, I think that would have been a more interesting thing to see. But in a show, I think it worked okay.
Well, I'd also add the cryostasis thing being a more general part of their society in the books completely changes the fact that the Santi are going to show up in 400 years. Because like right now they didn't have the cryogenic technology. So it was like, oh, 400 years is inconsequential to me. I literally could not care. But the idea that you could be in hibernation for 400 years and then reap the consequences of your own actions adds a certain amount of terror that is like absent because they didn't have it in the show until they like mentioned it with the monk.
Saul's character, him and Augie, just
he's either going to be fantastic or continue to be the worst possible part of the show. And I'll be curious if they do just wrap it up in season 2. If they change the ending to be the way I wanted it to be, I will be so happy.
Okay.
I will be
spoilers.
so happy.
But I appreciate that his character, like all the stuff with the wall faces, where it's just like, hey, I said I'm not a wall facer. Like, yeah, okay, that's fine. You're whatever you want.
Like that's the thing is like it was a lot more like tastefully done in that because in the what's it called in the book they're like, yeah, no, we understand, but we're still gonna follow you around and stuff.
Oh, that's
like they don't even say that. They're like, yeah.
And that's another thing, and that's why I just really appreciate the show, and I would have loved it as a teenager, is because that element, like that's another thing that like it feels like it's a lot of my like little subplots that I really think about and I think are really interesting put in one place. That what happens when a decision is made that can't be taken back? What does that look like? And there's literally nothing you can do about it, and so good luck. I just love that. I love so much that is in this, and it feels sacrilegious to give D&D this much praise for a show after having botched. Who knows? They could botch the ending, just like with Game of Thrones. This did have a pretty good... Also, if I had a nickel for every show that D&D made where a young girl character watches her father get killed up on a stage, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird it happened twice.
Yeah.
That the first scene, I'm like...
You know what? I didn't think about that. That's really weird.
Straight up Ned Stark. And I'm like, and then she turns into Arya Stark. So it's, it kind of all fits. On that note, thank you guys so much for watching. Is there anything else you want to say, Cameron?
It's okay book series. I think there are much better sci-fi out there like Dune. If you want high concept sci-fi with paper thin characters, go read the Dune saga.
Go watch her
just as crazy.
Watch her 2 episodes about Dune. Cameron talks a lot about it. Similarly to this.
Too much.
Yeah.
Too much.
Okay. Goodbye. Goodbye, you bug.